Making selections in Photoshop is one of the most important skills that I will teach you this semester. It's really important because it allows you maximum creative freedom. You'll be able to composite images together. You'll be able to take a person off of one background and put them on another background. You'll be able to take part of the image and blur it to make it less of a focal point, to bring the focus right into that area that you want it to be in. You'll be able to select part of an image in order to change the coloring on that part of the image. Hugely important. So there are huge changes now with Photoshop CC 2015.5. This upgrade is really recent as I'm making this video, and big changes in the way that you make selections and how well Photoshop works. It's a big improvement, and it seems to work so much better than previous versions, which work so much better than anything prior to CC. If you're still working with CS6 or previous to that, this will not work at all for you. You're going to be stuck with some of the older selection processes. You can look at the quick selection pre-CC 2015.5 video for that, but I would really recommend that you upgrade to the latest version. It's going to save you a lot of time and make your workflow much quicker and easier. So in Photoshop, as students, you get a discount. If you buy the whole suite, it's just over $200 a year at the academic pricing, academic superstore. If you are just a photographer and want Photoshop and Lightroom and Bridge, it's only about $10 a month. So it's very reasonable these days. So let me show you how this works. In any of the selection tools, anything that would give you marching ants, when you click on those tools, you'll see up here in the options bar, and that's what this is, this little thing under the title bar is the options bar. For every single tool, it's different. And any of the selection tools now, you're going to get a select and mask option. This will give you a number of tools to use. The best one of all is the quick selection tool. You can make a selection beforehand. If I cancel out, I can come in here and make any kind of a selection and then modify it still. So I don't have to start with that. I can also come in here to select and do, for instance, color range if I want. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But you don't have to use one of these to start. You can start instantly with select and mask. Up here you have the quick selection tool. And the way that works is you just run it over the portion that you want to keep, and the part that you don't want to select is left out. Now look at how we're seeing our interface here. We see it as an onion skin, and we can change the transparency setting here to show us what's selected and not selected. So if I leave it around 20%, which seems to be the one that pleases most people, I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to brush inside of her area, the part that I want to keep. I'm going to stay away from, it's clicking everything now because those are fairly similar colors. So when it does that, just use your Option on the Mac or your Alt on the PC and run over the edges of her hair. And you notice I'm coming in to her hair wherever there's background, right here for instance, wherever there's background showing through, I want that part not to be part of my initial selection. So I want to come in here, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Okay, and I can come in here and just do a quick little click to bring those pieces back in. Okay, so that's our initial selection. Those are the easy parts, the parts that are really solid. Now I want to use my edge detection brush, which is the second tool up here. I like to have a little bit of a soft edge on that possibly, so I'm going to bring that setting down. And your size, the smaller it is, kind of the more picayune it gets. I don't need it to be that small at this point, so I'm just going to leave it where it is. So I'm going to run over the edges of her hair now and let it, oh no, sorry, I'm in the top one again. Let me go back. Okay, Come back here and run over those edges with the edge detection brush, and you can see how it's picking up some of those little fine hairs at the edge, the wispiness. Let me go over this and you can see that's a really good example there. Okay, even those nice little hairs at the edge there. And right there, get a nice fall off. You can make the brush larger or smaller if it's not working really well for you. We have an edge detection setting in there if you think it might pick up some more stuff, might get a little bit more detailed. Can you see how it's, actually if I zoom in here, as I come in, it's starting to go into the hair a little bit more. And I don't think we even need to go into this right now, but it's WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. So you can play around with that smart radius kind of setting and see if that works for you. Okay, I'm going to close that just so it's out of our way. Then we have global refinements here, which means it's going to affect the entire selection. This one's smooth, so if you have something that's got a very curved edge, you may want to add just a little smoothing to that. It gets rid of a little bit of the jaggies. We can feather something. Photoshop does a really good job now of cleaning edges and keeping them very nicely cleaned, but if you think the edges are a little too hard, a little too brisk for your composition, here's where you can go in, and something like this I would put in a very tiny feather, if any at all, so a 0.3 to a 0.5. And if you wanted the contrast to change, you can see how as we up the contrast here, it brings a little more definition to the darker hairs. So I'm just going to bring that up just a tiny, tiny bit. Shift edge, if you put in a positive number, it's going to make the selection bigger by that many pixels. If you put in a negative number, it's going to make the selection smaller by that many pixels. So if I tell it to shift edge by -1 pixel, see, as I go up and down here, I'm doing it more, so you can see it's going to actually cut stuff off of the edge. If you've got some sort of a haloing that's going on, which means you've got a little residue along the edge, that may be something you want to do, but I don't think we need to do that in this case. Okay, for output settings, how do we want this to present? Decontaminate colors, I have heard, and I've heard this from a number of people, that it can kind of foul up how things are working, so I would avoid that in most cases. You need this when you are photographing somebody in front of a very vibrant color and the color kind of washes into the edges of the selection. There are other ways to deal with that, though, that work better. You can do a new layer with a layer mask. We're just going to come in here and go to selection, so it's going to output to a selection, and I'm going to tell it to remember the settings, so I don't have to put all those in the next time. And then I'm going to click OK. Okay, I want to back up just a little bit and show you some of the options that I kind of skipped over as I went through this. We have over here, I told you, the quick selection tool, which is awesome for making selections. This is the edge detection tool. So if I come in here and tell it I want to clean up those edges, that's exactly what the edge detection tool is for cleaning up the edges. And you can see even then, did a pretty nice job of doing that. And down here we have a brush, and this is the brush tool. It works if you're familiar with masks, which you will be in a couple of weeks, so if you're not, this is part to kind of ignore for the moment and then come back to in a couple of weeks. This is showing us our mask. This is the part, the white part is the part that's selected, and you can see how it goes into those little wispies. The black part is the part that's not selected. So if I have my brush here and I'm painting with white, it's going to add to the selection. If I want to get rid of some of these wispies, for instance, I would switch to black. Sorry, I gotta go back over here. Right there. Okay. I want to click right here on the minus to paint with black, and that way I can go in here and get rid of some of those wispies. I'll zoom in so you can see. So if I wanted to get rid of some of those wispies. Also remember the hardness. The brush can have a feathered edge or a little bit of a soft edge, which makes it look a little bit more natural in a situation like this. So there I go with smoothing out some of the wispy hairs if I want to. Now I don't want to flatten out her entire hair, but there are times when you have just one or two stray hairs and you've got a very smooth style and you would want to do that. I also have a lasso tool in here, so if I wanted to come into this area, for instance, and tell it that I want to add to the selection there, right there is to add, that's to subtract, that's the intersection of the selections. And I can zoom in using the zoom tool, and I can move around using the hand tool if I'm zoomed way in and can't see the whole thing. So those are the tools on the left hand side. These are your view modes over here. This is how you're looking at it. I can look at it on layers. That shows me the layer beneath. So if I have a background that I'm working with, I can see how good it looks on the new background right away. This is the mask mode that shows me the selection in black and white. All right, so this is just a selection shown differently than in marching ants. This is the same exact thing as marching ants, but just viewed differently. This is on white, and the reason it doesn't look white is because I have the opacity down, but you can see if I'm going to put it on white, I want to put the opacity way up to 100% to see how it will look on white. Same thing with black. Right there, that's how it would look on black. So you can see over here, if I were putting it on black, I might want to deal with this a little bit more carefully. Okay, this is an overlay, which just like the black and white, except this is clear and red. So the red would equal the black, the white would equal the clear. It's just another way of looking at your selection. It's the way we would look at it in quick mask mode, which we'll talk about in the future as well. And this is your marching ants, the way it looks there. Onion skin is, generally speaking, one of the best ways to look at something, and you can change the opacity of that as well. So it's going to show you the previous background here. We've already taken it off that, so that's why it's not showing it to us. But I wanted to show you those options as well. I'm going to cancel out because we've already made the selection on this and putting it on the background, and it looks just fine. One more fun thing I want to show you while we're here is one of the new options in Photoshop, and I have to come up here to this layer. Again, don't worry about the layers thing at this point because we're talking about layers in much more detail in week 3, but I cannot kind of isolate layers from everything at this point, so just kind of roll with me a bit. Okay. And filters. Filters are the fun house of Photoshop. There's all kinds of fun things you can do with filters. But one of the new fun things with filters is under the liquify menu, you have a facial aware liquify. And liquify just means turning something into liquid so that you can kind of move things around and reshape things. It automatically sees the face. You can see as I'm going over this, it shows the outline of the face, it shows where the nose is, shows where the mouth and the eyes are. So it is aware of how the face looks, where it is. If there's more than one face, it numbers the faces here and goes left to right. So I can change, by these sliders, I can change the eye size. She's a little squinty, so I can change her eye size. I can make her eyes open up. I can change how high the eyes are. I can change the width of the eyes. Okay. I can change how they're tilted, whether they kind of move up and down. And I can change the distance between the eyes if I want. You've got that option for all of the facial features here. So if I wanted to thin her nose down a little bit, make her look a little bit more pouty, I can actually make her smile a bit more. There we go. How's that? I can make her upper lip a little bit thicker if I want, lower lip thicker or thinner. As you move the sliders around, you see the differences there. and I can change the height of the mouth. And kind of cool too is that I can change the face shape. So in this case, I may want to thin down her face a bit, or maybe I just want to thin down her jawline. Come in here and thin that down and leave her face a little bit wider. Okay, so that is, and I'm going to click OK here so I can show you there's the before, there's the after. So you've got a really cool tool here in the new Photoshop that allows you to kind of change the facial structure and improve it. Now, I wouldn't change the facial structure for a client other than to maybe thin down a jawline a little bit if the person's heavy, and like her, open her eyes up if her eyes are looking a little bit squinty. That's a huge difference in her eyes. She looks very squinty there, and then I added a little bit of a smile. So it doesn't really change the way she looks all that much, but it's a great tool to have, and it's a lot of fun to work with. And if you're working with models, you can really change the way a model looks and make her look very, very high fashion. So that's a really fun little tip that I wanted to add on at the end here. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please be sure to put them in the discussion area for me, and have fun with the new Photoshop features.